Hey friends! My name is Desiree, aka Mama Friendly, and I do all sorts of videos on my channel. Cooking videos, vlogs, hauls, Disney content, vlogmas, a little bit of everything. So if any of that sounds like fun to you, I hope that you will subscribe and join me on my YouTube adventure. Today, my 12 Days of Cookies series continues. I am going to be making oatmeal raisin cookies. I've never made oatmeal raisin cookies before. And the thing about an oatmeal raisin cookie for me is that they're typically not my first choice. They're not the thing that I gravitate towards or the thing that I'm like, really craving. But when the craving does strike for an oatmeal raisin cookie, nothing else will do. So I think this is going to be a great recipe for me to have on hand just for when those moments strike. As usual, my recipe is going to be gluten and dairy free. This particular one is actually going to be nut free as well. So if that's a concern, welcome, you're in the right place. I already have my oven preheating to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and I've got my cookie sheet lined with parchment paper. So all that's left to do is basically everything, but let me start with showing you the ingredients. So for this recipe, you can use 3/4 cup of room temperature palm shortening. If you're not worried about dairy free, you can use butter as well, or instead. I'm going to be using oat milk based butter. I've opted to do this instead of the palm shortening because this way I'm still going to get a little bit of that buttery flavor in the cookies, obviously without having to use dairy, because that's important. The recipe calls for a 1/2 cup of coconut sugar and a 1/2 cup of just regular organic sugar. I don't have coconut sugar on hand. I imagine that it's to give it more of like a brown sugar, molassesy type flavor. But A, we are going to be using molasses anyway, and B, I don't have coconut sugar and I didn't want to go out and buy any just for this recipe. I'm trying to use what I've got. So instead I'm just going to use 1 full cup of my regular white granulated sugar. Speaking of, we're going to need 2 teaspoons of molasses, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, 2 eggs, 2 1/4 cup of oats, and I always make sure everybody is aware. Oats are naturally gluten-free, but they have an incredibly high chance of cross-contamination during the harvesting process. So, if you're concerned about gluten-free, and I imagine you are if you're here, make sure whatever oats you buy are actually marked gluten-free. Otherwise, you cannot be certain that the appropriate measures have been taken to make sure that there has not been any sort of cross-contamination. So again, that was 2 1/4 cups of our gluten-free oats. We need 1 1/2 cups of our gluten-free flour blend, and this is my favorite one. It's the one I always use for everything. We need 2 teaspoons of baking soda, a 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt, and of course you can't have oatmeal raisin cookies without raisins, so we're going to be using 1 full cup of those. Now for this recipe, you don't need any special equipment. You could just do everything by hand. However, I am going to be using my hand mixer for the first portion of it. So you could do it analog style, just with a whisk or a fork and your hand, but I'm going to be doing the high-tech-ish type way today. Whatever works for you. Again, we use what we've got. So the first step is to cream together our palm shortening, dairy-free butter, whatever you're going to use, along with your sugar, molasses, and vanilla. So I prefer to weigh the butter because I feel like that's going to be the most exact way to do it. 3/4 cup is equal to 12 tablespoons. So if you were using a stick of dairy-free butter, you would do it that way. I'm measuring in grams. 14 grams is a tablespoon. We have 12 tablespoons. We're looking for 168 grams of our butter. So I'm going to put them into this bowl that's sitting on my scale. Will I have enough is the question. Oh, it's looking like I'll be just on the nose, actually. That's 168 grams exactly, and I've got just enough to butter my toast in the morning, so that worked out. So next I'm going to do my sugar, and that's 1 cup of sugar. Whether you do it all white or you do half white, half coconut, maybe you want to experiment and throw some brown sugar in there too. I might eventually do that the next time I make this recipe, but as I've mentioned on my channel before, whenever I'm making a recipe for the very first time, I prefer to try to follow it exactly because I figure it's written that way for a reason, right? Once I've done it and I can see how it turned out, then I have a better idea of how I could potentially improve on it. And at that point, I will feel more comfortable experimenting. Next, I'm coming in with my 2 teaspoons of molasses. I don't use this frequently enough, I think, to ever really comprehend the smell that's going to come out of here. I'm Cuban. You may or may not know that. If you're an old friend of the channel, I'm sure you've picked it up by now. But Cubans don't really use molasses in a whole lot of anything. So this jar pretty much only gets brought out around the holidays. And lastly, our vanilla. I don't have a whole lot left in this particular bottle, so I'm just gonna whoop. Yeah, that works. So we're gonna cream this together with our handy dandy hand mixer. And then I'm gonna add the eggs and I'm gonna blend one more time until everything is creamy. That looks very, very pretty. Okay, I'm gonna leave the hand mixer right there so that if anything else wants to come off of the little beaters, it has an opportunity. Next, I'm gonna add in my oats. So remember that was 2 cups and a quarter of oats. At this point, we're gonna retire the hand mixer because everything else that we're gonna do is just gonna be kind of folded in. After all, we don't want these guys annihilating the oats, right? So I'm gonna take my quarter cup first. And next, actually this cup fits very nicely in my jar. So I'm just gonna do 9 of these total. And that'll bring us to 2 1/4 cups. 4, 5, 9. Perfect. That's my 2 1/4 cup of oats. Next, we need our 1.5 cups of flour, which would be what? 6 of our 1/4 cup measures. So why not? It's already dirty. We might as well. 5. And 6. Our 2 teaspoons of baking soda. So that's 1 and 2. 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt. And I'm just going to kind of give it a nice strong pinch. I'm going to take a spatula and at this point I'm going to kind of mix all this together to combine. Lastly, once this is all incorporated, I'm going to put in my cup of raisins and our dough will be prepared. This particular dough, according to the recipe, does not require chilling. I typically prefer to chill my cookie dough regardless because I find that for the most part, unless there's some specific reason why it's counterindicated or contraindicated, typically you get a better result just generally when you chill your dough before baking it. But like I said, I am going to follow the recipe exactly as it's intended. And if I find that they spread too much for my liking, then I will first off let you guys know so that you learn from my mistake, as it were. But also, I know that going into it next time I make it. But next time I'll just make sure to chill it, in spite of what the recipe says. So that looks pretty good and combined to me. It's kind of a wet dough, which is all the more reason why my spidey senses are tingling and telling me that I really should chill it. But we are going to do the thing, guys. We are following the directions, even if it goes against our better judgment. So there goes my 1 cup of raisins. Okay, now I'm getting excited. Now it looks like legit. Make sure there's a good disbursement throughout, and every little bit has some raisin in it. Because the only thing more disappointing than biting into an oatmeal raisin when you think it's a chocolate chip is biting into an oatmeal raisin knowing it's an oatmeal raisin, but then not getting any raisins in there. Like, who wants that? That's the whole point, isn't it? Actually, come to think of it, now that we're talking on chocolate chip recipes, I feel like up until this point, you could use this exact same recipe and just throw some allergy-friendly chocolate chips in here in place of the raisins. Or hey, let's say you're a wild one and you just want to go all out. You can throw some white chocolate chips in here with the raisins and make this a whole other thing. So that's pretty exciting. That might be another way I experiment with this recipe once it's all said and done and I make them again. So there's our finished dough. I'm going to set it aside for just a minute while I get my parchment lined sheet out. So my oven is preheated now. The recipe says to roll 2-inch balls of cookie dough in your hand, so make sure your hands are clean, and place them on the lined baking sheet. Press the dough into a disc with the palm of your hand and make sure to leave enough space around each cookie. So they do expect this to spread, but that's also confusing to me because typically when you have to shape the cookie before you put it on your situation to bake, then that tells me that whatever shape you leave it in is the shape it's going to remain while it bakes. So that's indicative to me of a cookie that won't spread. We're going to learn a lot during this recipe. So I guess let's start. I don't know how many cookies I meant to come away with, but about a 2-inch ball. I'm going to leave enough space for it to spread if it wants to, but I'm kind of expecting it not to too much. This is a very wet dough. I would almost call this like a thick batter before I'd call it a dough, if I'm honest. And it's looking like it's definitely gonna make at least 2 trays worth. There's no way I'm getting all of this batter onto this one sheet. So I'm expecting to get 9 cookies on this tray. And I'm also expecting to have to come back around and do at least 9 more. We might even need a 3rd batch. So that looks about right size-wise. I'm going to press them down. This is definitely a sensory adventure, I'm not going to lie. If you're the sort of person that's icked out by slimy things, or that just generally does not like to get their hands dirty while they cook, then may I suggest gloves, or may I suggest having somebody else do this part for you, because it's definitely not a neat endeavor. So these guys are going to go into our 350-degree oven for 12 minutes until the edges are lightly golden brown for a chewy cookie. If you wanted a crunchier cookie, you'd bake an extra 2 to 3 minutes. I don't particularly want a crunchy cookie, but I do know that my oven tends to take a little longer than typical, so I think I'm going to aim for 14 minutes, and hopefully they're done but still chewy at the end of that time. Once they're done, we're going to leave them on the baking sheet for a few minutes before we transfer them to a cooling rack. They're going to be soft at first, and they're going to firm up a little bit as they cool, so I'll do exactly that. I'm going to leave them on there for a few minutes, transfer them away, and then start on the next batch while the first one cools, and so on as needed. Alright guys, all I can say is, yikes! Holy spreading Batman. Like, that's a spreading cookie right there. It so happens that while these were baking, I went ahead and put the rest of the dough to chill, because why not? We're already here, right? We might as well experiment. So, I'm going to give these, let's say, 5, maybe 10. This is still kind of wet. So actually, I'm going to put them back in the oven for a couple more minutes. I'm going to bring them out and give them 10 minutes to cool before I transfer them off of this pan. That means that the other dough is going to have these baked for 14 minutes, another 2 in the oven, 10 minutes. I don't know, let's say half an hour total, approximately, of chilling time before I try to bake them, and I'm going to see if that makes a difference. I think it very obviously will. Will it solve the problem? Perhaps not, but I think it will definitely make a difference. So for right now, let's throw these back in here. We'll call it a 16-minute total cook time, and we'll see how it goes with our second batch of chilled dough. So, while I was waiting for the other dough to chill, I went ahead and I tasted some of this like outer bit of the cookie, the giant cookie that I made, and this is delicious. I don't taste like an obviously molasses flavor, but there is a little special of something to the dough The oatmeal texture is there without being like too in your face. It's cookie texture, but with a slight like chew to it. The raisins are perfection. Just enough sugar, just enough vanilla. It is awesome. So now that I know that the flavor is bomb, it's just a matter of trying to make them pretty. So it's been that extra 10 minutes that they've been chilling, so about the half hour total. Let's bring them out and see what we can do. So once again, we've got clean hands. This dough is a whole other animal. Look how it's holding its shape right there. This is very nice. I'm not saying again that this is going to solve the problem, but I definitely think we're going to have less spread on this second batch than we did with the original one. And in fact, I'm going to see if I can't be a little more strategic in my placement to also give them less opportunity to come together as one mega cookie like they did before. So I'm still gonna aim to put 9 in here, but I'm just gonna do a little bit of a triangle formation rather than just the 3 in a row tic-tac-toe type vibe we went for before. Will it make a very big difference? Again, probably not, but we're experimenting now, so let's see what we can do here. So the tragedy of this is that we do have 9 cookies there, right? I probably have enough dough for like maybe 2 more, but I haven't got room for them without like practically guaranteeing that they're gonna come together. So I'll have to do a third batch with just those 2 cookies. But let's go ahead and toss these in the oven before they get too much warmer. I'm gonna do 14 minutes. Actually, let's go somewhere in the middle. I'll do 15 since the original batch ended up cooking for 16 total, and we'll see how that works out for us. It's just occurred to me that I did not smush the balls down before I put them in the oven. So we'll see what difference that makes too. Okay, I'm excited to see the results. Okay, so they still spread quite a bit actually. Here's the other 2. I decided to throw them in on another pan just so that they'd be ready all at once. So they did still spread in spite of the chilling. Maybe not quite as much, but that might also be because I didn't smash them down. So maybe it took them longer to spread because I left them in their like original ball shape. But I do think that these look better. There's certainly no harm in chilling the dough. It might not have made a huge difference, but I think it made enough of a difference where I would recommend you chill your dough for at least a half hour before baking. Maybe make smaller cookies, maybe use more sheets or spread them apart more, or do them in like more batches so you could spread them apart more. But definitely this dough does have the tendency to spread, so you do have to take that into account. But the final product is delicious, and I definitely think that they are worth making in spite of maybe them not being the most beautiful cookies out there. So there you have it, guys. Another holiday cookie in the bag. Let me know what your favorite one has been so far. Let me know if you try these. I'd love to hear how they work out for you. And as always, I want to thank you all so much for being here and watching this video. I hope you all are enjoying Vlogmas. If you're liking it, I hope you'll please give this video a thumbs up and make sure you come back tomorrow for more. I'd also love it if you would subscribe and click the notification bell, because even when it's not Vlogmas, I post at least 3 times a week, and I wouldn't want you to miss a minute. Thanks so much again for watching. Bye.